Geeks, Chris here, and it's time for my top 10 of 2025. So my top 10, not only action figures, but items really, so comics and books as well. It was pretty tough to choose. There's been a lot of good stuff released this year, as there has been in previous years as well. It's a good time to be a geek for sure. So I planned to be a top 10, but then I added an extra one, so really it's my top 11 of 2025. So without further ado, let's get straight into it. My top 11 items of 2025. In the 80s, with the rise and tremendous success of Masters of the Universe, there was a lot of what we call knockoff and bootleg concepts that tried to do similar things, like companies were just pumping out cheaper figures that looked like Masters of the Universe but weren't exactly. So we had companies like Remco and others that made figures like that people would confuse with Masters of the Universe. These figures are new. They're from FORMO toys. They're part of their Warriors of the Galaxy line, which is an ode to those knockoff figures back in the day. They look just like them. They're absolutely fantastic, and they've got that limited articulation, so just moving at the waist, the head, the arms and the legs, and I think they've also got a bit more articulation than the 80s figures did, with boot cut and wrist cut as well. But yes, you can see that they're absolutely got that 80s kind of vibe about them. So these are the three figures from the first wave. There's also a second wave coming, which hopefully will be released in 2026. But yes, FORMO Toys doing some absolutely fabulous work. They've got the Legends of the Dragonor line and a whole bunch of other stuff that they are working on. But these are from Wave 1, and I'm looking forward to the rest of Wave 2 coming. So yes, FORMO Toys, definitely give them a follow. It's great to see some retro throwback figures come back in a new way. This fella is so big, I have to kind of tilt up to see him also. This is from the Loyal Subjects. This is a recreation of the My Pet Monster figure. Again, well, not a figure, a plush toy. I had a My Pet Monster, as I'm sure many of you did in the 80s. So he came with the removable chains and all that kind of stuff. So this recreation is a bit smaller than the one from the 80s, but they've done a fabulous job. They've got the colours right, and it's a lot cheaper option than buying the one from the 80s, because the prices of those are just astronomical. So yeah, pretty cool. So the Loyal Subjects have been doing some great work lately. They're also releasing the Mask figures, M-A-S-K. They are coming out, well, they should be out in December. I know they are in a few countries, but I'm getting mine hopefully in January. So yes, it's definitely been a year for recreations of figures back from the 80s that we never thought we'd get again, and much cheaper alternatives than picking up the original vintage figures. So My Pet Monster, I've kept him in the box. He looks good on the shelf. Very happy to have this ugly little fella in my collection. Speaking of recreations of 80s toys, this is Bravestar. Well, actually he's not called Bravestar because he's not an official Bravestar product, but Bravestar was a cartoon and awesome action figure line back in the 80s. I think the cartoon only lasted one season potentially, but basically a sci-fi lawman, and yes, he had like powers of different animals and stuff. So this figure is from RAMEN Toy. I think he was called the Marshal, because as I said, it's not a officially licensed Bravestar product, but it's very Bravestar adjacent. It looks very similar to the vintage figure with the colour scheme, the weapons, all that kind of stuff, ticking all the boxes. So very happy to add this figure. It came with a lot of accessories and just a fabulous sculpt, very well made. And again, RAMEN Toy, much like the Loyal Subjects, are just hitting all those nostalgia boxes and bringing back old properties and franchises and figures in new ways. So very happy to have this guy, the Marshal. McFarlane Toys also aren't one of the big boys like Hasbro or Mattel, but they have been pumping out some absolutely fabulous stuff over the last year in particular. These are from the Superpowers line, which is influenced by the Kenner Superpowers line that was released in the 80s. So they have the, again, retro figures that have limited articulation. So we've got Cyborg, Metamorpho, Adam, the Batman, Lobo, Rebirth, kind of black suit, Superman and Booster Gold. I've got Blue Beetle on the way as well, because he sold out quickly, but I managed to get one. But these is just awesome, very much like the Kenner Superpowers line in the 80s. As I said, they don't come with any accessories, most of them, unfortunately, but they have some deep cuts as well, like some of them are oddball characters and characters that weren't released in the original 80s line. But McFarlane Toys have had a great year. They are releasing a whole bunch of lines in their DC Multiverse figures. They're also doing their Super Friends line, which is kind of the 70s, 80s aesthetic and the 6-7 inch style action figure. But these are just great little small figures, very much like you remember from the Kenner days back in the 80s. Unfortunately, McFarlane are losing the DC license, so I think 2026 is the last year that we will see figures, DC figures at least, from McFarlane Toys. But they have given us a lot of deep cuts in these wonderful lines. So if you're a fan of DC Comics like I am, McFarlane Toys, 2 thumbs up from me. Another highlight of this year. Speaking of superpowers, this is from the original Kenner Superpowers line. This is Mantis, one of the bad guys, and he was part of the Fourth World Saga. I had this figure as a kid and lost him, as I did with most of my Superpowers figures from my youth. I don't know where he's gone, but I've been chasing this figure at a good price for years actually, so I picked this up. So this is definitely one of my faves. The Superpowers line from Kenner all had action features, so you would squeeze their legs or their arms or whatever, and they would do an action feature like that. I also picked up, related to this, the first appearance of Mantis in comics, created by Jack Kirby, so that was in Forever People, I believe. So I've also picked that up this year, which is absolutely amazing. So yes, a very obscure character. This is in good condition. I think I had to get this from America, but it was a good price, even including with shipping, because you don't see them very often. So yes, obscure figure, Mantis from the Kenner 80s Superpowers line. Much like the Mantis from the Kenner Superpowers line, this guy is Colonel K from the Danger Mouse line, and again I had him as a child in the 80s, and he was on my hunting list for many years, and I picked him up this year at Nexus Toy Fair. So this is Colonel K, Danger Mouse's boss. Danger Mouse was a cartoon, an English cartoon, and a toy line back in the 80s. This is basically just a rubber figure, doesn't have any articulation apart from the little, limited articulation in his arms and that kind of stuff, because he is a rubber figure. But yes, I definitely have distinct memories of playing with this guy as an 80 in the 80s, so very happy. I think I paid $50 for him, which is a bit expensive, but you just do not see Danger Mouse, vintage Danger Mouse figures around these days. So yeah, what year is he from? 1981. So very happy to add Colonel K to my vintage toy collection. Something I never thought I'd see was Marvel and DC crossing over again. So they used to do it a lot of times in the 90s. Batman, Superman, Green Lantern, like all these characters would cross over with, Spider-Man, Captain America, whatever. Fantastic Four would happen a lot in the 90s, but hasn't happened for 20 plus years. So in September and November, both DC and Marvel released their Batman, Deadpool crossover issues with a whole bunch of short stories as well. So I've just got 6 comics here, but there's basically just 2 of the same comic, just with different covers. So yeah, absolutely happy to have these comics on hand, and I'm pleased to announce that I believe DC and Marvel are doing more of these crossovers in the future. So it's absolutely great, and they've got the best writers and artists on these titles, and they're just such a fun read. So there's a Jim Lee Wolverine Batman cover, we've got X-23 and Nightwing there, and of course Batman and Deadpool. So probably their most famous flagship characters at the moment. So very happy to grab all these. It's very much a nostalgic bait, but I love it, and they're just lovingly made, and I'm looking forward to more Marvel DC crossovers in the future. Mattel have absolutely been killing it this year with their Masters of the Universe products. So they've had crossovers with Transformers. They've been on shelves. They've had the Ninja Turtle Masters of the Universe crossover for a while now, and the new one is the Masters of the Universe Thundercats, which I have the full first wave of, and will do a video review in the new year. But these, this is only $59. It's a double pack, a recreation of the figures. It's pretty much close as how they looked back in the 80s, with just updated paint, basically. But I love the display-friendly packaging. Again, I've got a video of this on my channel as well. But Mattel just continued to do wonderful work with their Origins, with their cartoon collection, and with their wonderful Masterverse products as well. And just they always go all out with their packaging and just the design elements that they place on their figures. But it always brings me joy. You could walk into Kmart or Big W or whatever and just see new Masters of the Universe products on shelves in 2025. That just makes me very, very happy. So I'm happy that Mattel are leaning into the adult collector friendly market and creating stuff like this, with He-Man and Skeletor 2-pack here. So yes, absolutely wonderful. Keep up the good work, Mattel. Going back to Superpowers, this is an absolutely massive tome, and it has been kind of a mythic status for years and years and years. This is basically the official 1982, I think, DC Comics style guide. So this is what would have been given to licensee, partners back in the day if they want to put a picture of Batman on the pillowcase or Superman on the lunchbox or whatever. This is the correct colours, the correct artwork that you could use direct from Warner Brothers / DC Comics themselves. So yeah, this is the first and only time that it's actually been released officially. This is by, I think, Standards Manual. I had to get this from America. There was no place in Australia that was releasing it, but it's filled with some absolutely fabulous artwork from Jose Luis Garcia Lopez, who did all this kind of work. I've got a whole video on my channel about this artwork, but you'll notice some very familiar looking model sheets and characters all throughout this book. So it's just a wonderful look at the 80s kind of DC Comics at the time. Absolutely gorgeous to look at, fabulous artwork, and they've even recreated the textures and the hole punches and all that kind of stuff from the original. So absolutely glad that we have this in official format. And it's got an introduction by Paul Evans, who was the president and publisher for quite a few years. But yes, if you could get a hold of this, I definitely recommend it. A bit of DC Comics history and just a beautiful, pretty book to look at. This is Krieger the Shunned and Jaeger. These are from Harvinger Studios and their Savage Crucible line, which is, as you can kind of tell, fantasy, barbaric, very awesome, highly detailed, a lot of paint applications. They come with a ton of accessories actually, and a map and deluxe packaging and a bio of each of the characters inside. So and each of them come with little lovely weapons as well, and bonus cards which you can use for Dungeons and Dragons. They come with little stat blocks which you can use for D&D. So yeah, they've really thrown in a lot of bonus features, and as you can see, very detailed figures. Standard articulation, but actually the world building is absolutely amazing. And yes, no detail goes unpainted or untouched. So very happy that I waited for these for a while, but they were definitely worth a wait. So give Harvinger Studios a follow on their socials and see what they come up with next. But these two are from the Savage Crucible line, highly recommended. Before we finish up and bring this countdown to a close, an honourable mention to this wonderful figure, Spider-Man 77. Never thought I'd get this figure. So this is based on the 1977 live-action movie and TV series starring Nicholas Hammond. But that was my first introduction with Spider-Man. So yes, it's very old school and very kind of silly when you look at it now. But that was most people's kind of introduction, I would imagine, from Spider-Man onto the small screen. So Marvel Legends, they keep pumping out some good figures, and yes, I'm very happy to get an obscure one such as this. So keep up the good work, Marvel Legends team. Also from Hasbro is the wonderful team that are pumping out these G.I. Joe classified figures. So the G.I. Joe obviously is a cartoon and action figure line and comic line that have been around, well, since the 60s really, but these are from the 80s when they kind of redesigned. So I'm only collecting the G.I. Joe classified figures of figures that I had as a kid, which were the smaller scale figures, the O-ring style. These are the 6 and 7 inch style, heavily accessorized and heavily articulated figures. And again, they just keep producing wonderful obscure characters. So we've got Storm Shadow, Cobra Commander, Sci-Fi, and Raptor. So only one good guy and 3 bad guys, you can tell by the Cobra logo. And these are all figures, as I said, that I had as a kid. Otherwise I could go down a very big G.I. Joe classified rabbit hole because they're such awesome figures. I have played with some of these, but I've kept them in box, but I'll definitely give them their own video. I just love the oddball characters again, like Raptor. And yes, just just fabulous. I've got such distinct memories of playing with these as a kid. The 80s version, Cobra Commander, I think this is in his version 2 uniform with the armoured silver, and obviously Storm Shadow facing off against Snake Eyes. So yes, wonderful character selection, wonderful artwork on the sides, and I'm very happy that G.I. Joe Classified are showing no signs of slowing down. So they are my last pick to round out the top 10 of 2025. there you have it. I have so much stuff I can't even fit in my top 10 in the one shot, but this is most of them. So it's been a year of nostalgia, but also of new toy companies making new intellectual products and properties. So yes, it's a very exciting time to be a toy and comic collector and enthusiast such as myself, and I can't wait to see what 2026 brings for sure. Thank you for watching. I hope your 2025 has been absolutely fabulous and you have managed to have some rest and joyful time over the holiday season, and I'll catch you in the new year. Goodbye, geeks.